I was saying, do you want to
Should
start
I go,
with
or
reading?
Sure.
I will just say thank you so much, everyone, for being here. Thank you to the Yankee Bookstore for selling the books and being, yes, yeah, round of applause. Thank you to the Little Theater for hosting us. And we are, I think, going to get started with Alison reading. Before I let you read, though, I will say for folks, I am Michaela Lavelle. I'm the director of the Queechee and Wilder Libraries. And as a librarian, when new books come in, I typically try to let patrons take them out before I do. This was one that I snatched immediately. I was the first one to read it at the library, and I was very excited about that. So I'm really grateful to be here with you. And yeah, let's get it started.
Thank you. I'm grateful for your enthusiasm and your review that you wrote.
Oh, yeah. Thank you.
And thank you for everyone here and for everyone who's played a role in putting on this book festival. I'm sure it's hard enough to put on a book festival when it's not lightning and thundering with your tents with metal poles. I can only imagine how stressful that's been. So thanks for just continuing and keeping calm and making this a great weekend. I will just read a little bit, just so that folks who haven't read anything about this book at all so you have some idea of what we are talking about up here. And it will be just from the beginning, 2 pages. I don't think you have to know much about what's going on here, except that the main character her name is Phoebe. She's 40 years old. She decided one morning not to go to her job teaching English at a college, and got on a plane and flew to Newport, Rhode Island, and checked into a ridiculously expensive luxury hotel that she cannot afford. So what you're seeing is right after she checks in and she's getting on the elevator, and you're finding out in this scene why she's here. And she also realizes while checking in that there is a very extravagant wedding taking place at this hotel, and the bride mistakes her for one of the wedding guests because the bride has made sure that everyone at the hotel is exclusively there for the wedding. So she just assumes everyone she sees is there for the wedding. So yeah, this is one of the first scenes that I wrote while writing this book. Did this just, okay, you can still hear me. So while I was writing this scene, I was figuring out for myself why she was here. You know, I just had this fantasy of writing a book about a woman just not going to work and going to a hotel she couldn't afford. And I was like, I'll figure out why she's there on the way. And so that's what I did. This part is a bit dark, so I apologize if it is too dark for you on this beautiful sunny afternoon, but it gives you a sense of what the rest of the book is about. Phoebe walks into the elevator and feels relief when the doors start to close. Finally, to be getting away from the wedding people, to be doing something for a change, to have a key to a place that is not her house. Hold the elevator, a woman calls out. Before Phoebe knows it's the bride, Phoebe knows it's the bride before she sees her. She yells like she deserves this elevator, but nobody deserves anything, not even the bride. Phoebe presses the button to close the doors, but the bride slides a hand between them. They don't bounce open like they're supposed to. Maybe because the Cornwall Inn was built in 1864. An old hotel has no mercy, not even for the bride. Fuck, the bride shouts. Oh God, Phoebe says. She pries the doors back open, then stares at the bride's hand in disbelief. You're bleeding. The bride holds up the gash across the back of her knuckles like a child and takes the tissue Phoebe offers without saying thank you. Phoebe presses the button and the doors close again. The women don't say anything as the bride politely bleeds into the tissue and they begin to ascend. Phoebe hears the bride try to steady her breath, watches the tissue darken. I'm really sorry, Phoebe says. I didn't realize that would happen. Oh, I'm sure it'll be fine, the bride struggles to say. She clears her throat. So, are you in Gary's family? That's her fiancé. No, Phoebe says. Are you in my family? You don't know who's in your own family, Phoebe asks. The question makes Phoebe want to laugh, and it's a strange feeling, the first time she's wanted to laugh in months, years maybe, because how does the bride not know her own family? Phoebe knew everybody in her family. She had no choice. It was so small, just Phoebe and her father, tiny enough to fit inside his old fishing cabin. I have a very large family, the bride says, like it's a problem. Well, I'm not in your family, Phoebe clarifies. But you have to be in one of our families. No, Phoebe says, I'm not in any family. It had been a crushing realization, one that started slowly after the divorce and got stronger with each passing holiday, until she woke up this morning to such a quiet house, she finally understood what it meant to have no family. She understood it would always be like this, just her in bed, alone, no longer even the sound of her cat, Harry, meowing at the door. But everybody's here for the wedding. I made sure of it. This has to be some kind of mistake. The bride says it as if Phoebe is the big nightmare she has always been dreading. Phoebe is something going wrong at a time when nothing is supposed to go wrong. Because every little thing during a wedding has the power to feel like an omen, like the high winds through the park that flipped over the paper plates and sent a chill down Phoebe's spine on her own wedding day. We should have gotten real plates, she thought, something with weight and substance. There's no mistake, Phoebe says. This is Phoebe's happy place, the place Phoebe has chosen out of all the possible places. How dare the bride make Phoebe feel like she's not supposed to be here? But if you're not here for the wedding, then what are you here for? The bride asks in a much lower pitch, as if her real voice has finally emerged. Because now in this private space with a person not attending the wedding, the bride doesn't have to be the bride. She can speak however she wants, and so can Phoebe. Phoebe is nobody, and the only good thing about being nobody is that she can now say whatever she wants, even to the bride. I'm here to kill myself, Phoebe says. She says it without drama or emotion, as if it's just a fact, because that's what it is. She waits for the truth of it to stun the bride into an awkward silence, but the bride only looks confused. What did you just say? The bride asks. I said, I'm here to kill myself, Phoebe repeats, more firmly this time. It feels good to say it out loud. If she can't say it out loud, then she probably won't be able to do it. And she has to do it. She's decided. She's come all this way. She feels relief as the doors begin to open, but the bride presses the button to close them. No, the bride says. No, Phoebe asks. No, you definitely cannot kill yourself. This is my wedding week. Your wedding is a week? Well, like 6 days, if you want to be technical about it. That's a long wedding. Phoebe's wedding was a single night. She had tried not to make a big deal out of it. And why? It seems silly now to have not celebrated something good when she had the chance. But Phoebe and her husband were a year out of graduate school, trained to live on a stipend with a cheap bottle of wine and a nice tree in the distance. And a wedding was such a spectacle, Phoebe thought. Every time she ordered flowers or sampled another piece of cake or told her friends how happy she was, she got this horrible feeling that she was bragging. A week is actually pretty standard now, the bride says, with a tone that makes Phoebe feel so old. And people are coming a long way to be here. But Phoebe doesn't care. This is the most important week of my life, the bride pleads. Same, Phoebe says. Thank you. I once made the mistake of having a watermelon seltzer while I was lecturing, and I said I would never, ever public speak while drinking seltzer again, but that's what's happening. So I apologize for any sounds that emerge from me.
Thank you for reading that. I feel like those opening pages set the tone of the book so well in that this woman is grieving. She's grieving her life, she's grieving her marriage, she's grieving a miscarriage, she's grieving her cat, and she stumbles into a wedding with someone that really is just there for a celebration. Mm-hmm. And that's such a funny circumstance, an absurd circumstance. Can you talk about how did this plot develop in your brain?
Sure. Excuse me. Yeah, so like I said earlier, I was hello, my friends just arrived. I was really trying to figure out why she was here as I was writing this, because I was writing this book as sort of a break from the second novel that I published, Notes on Your Sudden Disappearance, which, has a similar tone. I like to go for the very bleak but hopefully funny kind of area of life. And I was in a really bleak part of the book, and I thought, why am I doing this? Right? Why am I writing about death when I could be writing about anything else in the world? So I started to cheat on that novel with The Wedding People. I didn't know it was The Wedding People at the time. I was just going with it, right? So I wanted it to be fun. I wanted it to be just the feeling you get when you're at a great hotel or at a big fancy wedding. I just wanted it to inhabit that space, because that was kind of new for me as a writer. I was fantasizing, and I was like, okay, she could be here for any fun reason. She is here to meet an old lover, or maybe she's an assassin, and maybe this is my spy book or my murder book. And then I wrote the scene that I wrote, and I was like, why did you do that? I truly thought no one is ever going to buy this book. You just did exactly what you always do, which is you go to the darkest place possible, especially when you wanted to go to the funnest place possible. But I knew that was the plot because it felt right. I don't know if there are other writers in this room, that feeling. It's just oh no. This is the plot. And I just didn't want anything to do with it. So I abandoned the novel, went back to my second book, which felt extremely light so all of a sudden, and finished it. And then really didn't think I was going to go back to it. And then when I was trying to come up with ideas for my third novel, I often go back into the old stuff. Was there anything I was working on that could still have life? And I reread this scene, and I thought, oh, okay. I kind of wanted to know what Phoebe was going to do, and I wanted to know if Lila was how this was going to mess up her wedding. I wanted to know if Lila would be so consumed with this woman in her hotel, that she would just pester her every 5 seconds, which is kind of what ends up happening in the book. And what would become of their relationship. And so I knew, I was like, okay, I'm ready to write this story. And I knew it was the plot because, to me, the opposite of a wedding wasn't murder. It wasn't, I don't know, it wasn't an affair. It was sadness. That's all the bride wants at the wedding. That's what you have to bring when you show up to a wedding, is happiness. Put yourself aside. You don't have feelings for 3 to 4 days. Just eat the cocktail shrimp and say your life is great, and then cry on the way home. And I just thought that it's so hard to do that when you're the person who's really struggling. And so I just became fascinated by that contrast. And I also worked at weddings, so I was the sad photo booth attendant standing by the rental booth. Probably at periods of my life where I felt very sad or very broke or just extremely bored and watching people have the time of their lives, so that obviously formed part of this book as well.
The thing about the weddings I picked up on too, and I feel like this book has a lot of it's structured by the events of the wedding. Can you talk a little bit about that? Each section is based on what Lila had planned for her 6-day wedding engagement.
Yeah, it was really remarkable how long it took me to realize that I could just do that. I think writers always come at their work with this feeling I have to make it more complicated than it needs to be. I used to really struggle with how do you tell the reader what day it is without telling them what day it is, and like, it's 2 days after the last day that, and it's like, oh, you can just say it's Wednesday. And the reader's fine with that. So once I got to my third book, I had, learned a bit about what things I could make easier for myself as a writer. And I used to think, and I think a lot of young writers feel like, oh, if I have a plot that's selling out, or like if I have a structure that makes sense, I'm a boring writer, or so, what I mean? Like, and I was like, it can just be the days of the wedding. Oh my God! And once that happened, everything just made sense to me. I was like, okay, we're just going to move day by day, and that's how I'm going to write this book. So, unlike my second book, which took me 10 years to write, this book felt like a very orderly, manageable process, which was a completely new experience for me as a writer. And one that I, told myself that if I was going to continue to be a writer, I couldn't have those 10-year sagas anymore. Like, I needed, for my own mental health, to be able to write a book in a few years. So the structure was really about that, and once I had that in place, it gave me new ideas. Oh man, what's the most absurd event that could happen at a wedding, or so it just really became generative.
That's awesome. And with the structure of a wedding being rigid, the roles are also rigid. Like, Lila is a bride. Mm-hmm. There are bridesmaids. There is a groom, and Phoebe comes in without that role too, and is, as you read, not affiliated with either side of the family. She's just there on her own. She starts breaking the start of a eventual breakdown of a wedding role. Can you talk a little bit about how that, like the introduction of a stranger, someone outside, mm-hmm. and like the roles of a wedding played into this?
Yeah. That was also something I knew from the very start that I wanted in this book, that perspective of the stranger getting increasingly entangled in the wedding, rather than the story coming from the bride's point of view, or the maid of honor, or someone who was already part of the deal. Because something that I learned while I was working at those photo booths at all these weddings in graduate school was that when, I always had to dress for the event, which I thought was kind of fun at the time, but now I'm like, oh, they just didn't want to pay for uniforms. So I always looked like a wedding guest, and, people would come over, and like I looked like a wedding guest that was not enjoying the wedding. So it, I think, attracted someone who was like looking for someone outside of their family or outside of their friend group, just someone they could talk to that was sort of a stranger. And once I told them that I just worked there, they were like super relieved. They could tell me anything now because there were no stakes. Like, I wasn't going to report it back to my friend who was the bride, or, so I felt like I got to actually really know like the secret truth of this person's experience at the wedding, and what was making them sad, or what was uncomfortable for them, or and people, when they're getting increasingly drunk for a few hours, tell you a lot. So it was just, I just wanted that. I thought that was what made my job interesting, and I thought that's what would make the book interesting, that Phoebe was this person that everyone could just be honest with, and in doing that, they became increasingly more honest in their actual lives and how the week unfolded.
And she does. She gets all the tea from everyone in the cast.
Yeah.
And you built like a pretty big ensemble cast of characters, and they're all so lovable and human. Like, you gave them each something special that built them out as a character. I feel like, I love Juice. And the tidbit about her nickname and the drama of that, and the way that came from her grief. And then we're talking about O.J. Simpson and that whole breakdown of what a personal nickname means, mm-hmm. As a way to build out this 12-year-old who's found herself at this wedding, along with Lila and all of the other characters. Was there anyone of the ensemble that was really fun for you to write?
I don't know. I think I always feel like I have a very boring answer to this question because I just like them all, in the way that it's hard to choose, what was your favorite vacation or something? They're all different experiences. I thought writing Lila's mom was maybe especially fun because there was a line in one of that I gave her that was like, Patricia talks as though she's like posthumously writing her autobiography from beyond the grave. And once I was like, oh, that's what she talks like, then I could have her say anything. And that was fun. Usually you censor yourself because you're like, well, a real person wouldn't say that. But it felt like I gave Patricia permission to talk in a very strange way. So that was a lot of fun. But I like side characters a lot because I love starting with that one detail that you see as a stranger. Like it's like being at the airport or like working at a wedding. You hear one line of dialogue or you notice one thing about the groom's bow tie or something. And Neck Pillow, who was one of the characters you meet in the opening, named because she's just still wearing her neck pillow from the airplane. That was based off of me sitting at an airport at a long layover next to a couple, and a woman had her neck pillow around her neck, and her husband was across from her, and every time she said something, the husband would respond with irritation. And I was like, is it because of the neck pillow? Does he just want her to take the neck pillow off and attach it to her bag? I don't, who knows? Probably not. But that to me as a writer is fun. You latch onto that detail. That's all you know about the side character. And then you have to do the work of imagining how they are not just that, right? Yeah, so to me, that was the fun of writing all of them.
One of my favorite lines about Patricia, Lila's mom, is at the first night, they're looking at the reception, the opening reception with the binoculars. And Lila says, oh, look at my mom. And Phoebe's like, which one is she? It's like, she's the one that looks like she's in a Dancing with the Stars outfit. And Phoebe goes, you need to be more specific. And Lila says, that's really specific. And that just was so funny, and I could picture her out there working the room.
Yeah, I
at
imagine
her
the
daughter's
dress
wedding.
Always to be yellow for some reason.
I did too.
Yeah, with a lot of ruffles.
Yeah, exactly. And the dynamic between Phoebe and Lila that unfolds is really interesting and goes through a lot of peaks and valleys that feel like they should be more reminiscent of a 7-year friendship than a 3-day friendship. And they start off feeling very opposite, but they're really, I don't know, I felt like they were really parallel characters in a lot of ways. Can you talk about how you kind of developed their dynamic?
Yeah, I mean, to me, I think because I'm a writing professor and this is how I teach plot to my students, I'm like, just think in contrast, think in paired opposites, right? That if you have one character feeling this, the other character is feeling the exact opposite or something like that. And I mean, it's a very simple way of introducing the idea of plot without being so technical, right? Like the inciting incident and rising act, that can really blunt people's creativity. So I was really thinking a lot about that when I wrote this book. And so to me, Phoebe and Lila were, Phoebe is the embodiment of despair, and Lila is the embodiment of a woman who is at her happiest. And Phoebe is at the end of her life, and Lila is planning this celebration to start the beginning of her new life. And so there was a lot there that felt like, okay, they're just on opposite ends of the world. And as I was writing the book, it really did just start to feel to me that they were in many ways in the same place, that they were in these big transition moments, and they were scared, and they were wondering what their past lives meant up until this point, and like trying to look into the future as well. So not everyone's always in that type of phase, right? And so, and they also both felt like they couldn't be honest with anyone in their real life, right, about the truth of what they felt. And so for them, being in these hotel rooms and having all these conversations was about bringing that out of each other. And both had reasons to not care what they said to each other, right? Like, Lila's the entitled bride. This is my wedding. I don't even know you. What do you matter? I can tell you I don't like my fiance's beard, actually. But I'm not going to tell the bridesmaids because that makes it sound like I have a problem with my fiance, And Phoebe is at the end of her life and feeling liberated to finally be honest, and she can say whatever she wants. And so it's this honesty that, for me, was the center of their connection. For me, I know whenever I'm in a position where I feel like I can't be honest, I avoid that person or I avoid that situation. And when I gravitate to where I know I can just be open. And so that was what the whole relationship was about, and figuring out how that would change them, right? Not just bring them a friendship, but how that would actually start to make Phoebe think differently about what she was doing and make Lila think differently about what she was about to do.
And I feel like the emotional turning point of the book for me was when you brought in the tarot reader for the bridesmaids, and they all get a tarot card reading, and Phoebe is going through hers, and the tarot card reader kind of doesn't know what to do with the cards that Phoebe gets, and that was really fun for me to read. I love tarot, so I want to ask about it.
Yeah.
But it was a really interesting way to bring in, and as they're all sharing, Lila's the only one that doesn't share initially. She's like, I'm not ready to think about this truth, and how true is tarot? I mean, we can all speculate, but and I love it. So that's from a fan. Yeah. Can you talk about tarot? I'm so curious how that was brought
I think
into
there's
the book.
actually a tarot reading in every one of my novels, I've realized.
Oh my gosh.
And I don't know what that means about me. Other than that, I do like getting tarot readings. Yeah. And I don't know if it's because I believe in it. I don't think I do, but I always think something real happens in those conversations. Like, anytime someone says something about your life, I think in the book there's you're going to be amazing in e-sales one day, you're either surprised by that news or you're like, oh yeah, that's what I thought. It teaches your responses to whatever the tarot reader says actually reveals something about how you view your life or yourself. And so I'm always moved by tarot readings, whether or not, I don't think you have to believe in them for you to have a feeling about them. But I actually got a grant from Providence College, the CAFR grant, I'm looking at Chard, to research this book, which is a ridiculous book to research because it involved a 4-day stay at a luxury hotel. And my colleagues are like, what? You can do that? People were getting grants to study ants or and I was like, yeah, no, this is the research I've chosen to do for this book. So I stayed at a hotel that was very similar to this one, and they had an in-house tarot reader, which I thought was an essential item for every hotel. And I got a tarot reading, and I remember I thought it was funny how specific she was. I was in a moment in my life where I was like, am I going to have kids? Am I not? Am I going to get married? Or am I not? And she was like, you are going to go on a very important vacation. And I was like, okay. Is it this one? Probably that's true. I kept feeling underwhelmed. I think that was where I got the line, you're going to be big in e-sales. It's you just weren't, that wasn't what you wanted to know. And she kept telling me very underwhelming facts about what was going to happen to me. And then she found out I was a writer, And she's like, I'm a writer. And we ended up like workshopping her manuscript for the rest of it. So I was charmed by the whole thing, and I just really wanted a tarot reader to bring out something that, for Phoebe, Phoebe, in that scene, one of the things, I think the tarot reader is saying all these wrong things about Phoebe, and then she says something like, the cards are telling me you're here, you're here. Does that mean anything to you? Like the tarot reader is like, that means nothing to me. But for Phoebe, by this point in the week, it means everything, because she's like, I am here, yes. For someone who wasn't expecting to be here, that makes her cry in a way that feels cathartic. And so I just really wanted something sincere to come out of it too.
Yeah, and I feel like Phoebe's journey kind of at this point in the book is needing permission to go with what she wants, and Lila as well, like the need for permission to act on the things that you want to do, your desires, to trust yourself, and the permission to trust yourself. And I have felt like that's something that's tied a little bit to my experience as a woman and a young woman. And I don't know if that's something that you feel as well, but that I felt was like the most powerful theme through the book, was like, how do people come into this understanding that you can trust yourself, and like those things that you want to do, if you need permission, then you need to find someone to give you permission until you can give that to yourself. Mm-hmm. And I'm curious if that, the setting of a wedding being so gendered, I guess. I don't know, was that something that you were thinking about, or is this me in like literary analysis brain, like really doing the most?
No, I'm sure everything that is coming through analysis is probably there. But I'm probably the worst person to answer that question, because I think writers are not great at doing analysis of their own work. But I will try. A wedding is so gendered. It's rigid in the roles that you're often asked to play. I think of weddings very much like plays. Like you really are given a role, sometimes actual lines. You're told to wear a certain outfit, and you play that part for however long you're at the wedding, and those parts can be really gendered, especially for the bride. I think we're inclined to dislike Lila at first in the book, and we're inclined to dislike brides for some reason as a culture. Like I think we pick on them a lot for getting too worked up about their wedding, or wanting a perfect wedding. And so I really wanted to move beyond that trope and like really think about, well, what was behind that pressure and what was behind Lila's obsession with having the perfect wedding. I'm not the first person to examine that, but I just was curious to examine it myself as a writer in my own way. And this sense that, when you go to a wedding, you just think about your own life, what decisions have I made that have led me here? Should I have married that person? Should I not have married that person? What if I didn't break up with that person? I just think thoughts float back to you during these times. And for Lila, if she's the bride, the whole role is to be happy the whole time, the happiest she's ever been. She's getting everything she's wanted. And she's realizing throughout this week that she's not sure what she actually wants. And she's confused between like what she wants and what society like has given her to want. And so there's a scene where she just sort of unravels in the book, and she confesses that she actually doesn't even know if she wants anything. She can't even be sure of that. All she knows is what she's afraid of happening, and she just tries to keep that from happening, and that's how she's been living her life. And so that was, for me, a realization at some point in my life too, that I really wanted to bring into the book. And I think it is also true for Phoebe as well. She realizes she's been acting a certain way. I think she describes herself as feeling like she's been in an Ibsen play this whole time, and she's just waiting for the audience to declare her a bad woman or a good woman. And she's like always waiting for that verdict after everything she does. And so trying to free her from that was all of that is wrapped up in like how we're conditioned as young women, and how as we get older, we start to maybe realize some terrifying things about how we've lived our lives up until that moment.
Yeah, and I think that makes a lot of sense. One of my favorite kind of in the giving permission things, Patricia, Lila's mom, talks about her getting her naked body portrait commissioned by someone that asked her to do it when she was in her 30s. Now she's in her 60s, and was like, it's time. If I look back on my body at 90, I'm going to be sad that I didn't get this commissioned at 60, the same way I'm thinking about my 30-year-old body. Mm-hmm. And she's like, I just wanted to. It's like, and the artist turned out to be a cubist, and that was a bummer. But but I did it anyway. But I did it anyway, and it was huge, and it was a big part of someone giving Phoebe permission to get a naked portrait by a cubist. No, but like do what she wanted to do. Mm-hmm. And I'm curious about the ending, not in a spoiler way, but although this book has been out for a minute, you should read it.
I think I gave a bunch of spoilers.
Okay,
already.
I think I did too. Yeah. But there are both Lila and Phoebe make decisions at the end. Were you expecting the paths that they chose to be what they did? Was there ever doubt about what they were going to do?
Oh yeah, I kind of knew vibes-wise what I wanted from the ending, which is not a very good guide, because you have to make sure that the actual events that are unfolding match those vibes that you feel are right for the ending. And I think a writer is always struggling with like how happy to make the ending, how sad to make the ending. And usually I think I go for a pretty bittersweet, if not kind of sad ending. And I just felt like when I was writing this, I just couldn't do that. I don't know. I couldn't go in that darker direction. And which is unusual for me and made me nervous. So after I submitted it to my publisher, I think it was like pretty late in the game, I was like, I need to change the ending actually, and this character doesn't do this, and this character, and they're like, no, you are not allowed to make any changes at this point. I'm sure I was, but they just banned me from it. And I'm really glad they did, because I think, even though certain things feel right some days, then the next days you second guess it. And you're like thinking of all the thousands of Amazon reviewers and what they're going to say, and that's not a helpful thing to do, by the way. And so I don't want to give away any spoilers, but I will just say that for me, this book starts in a dark place, and it was about getting to a surprisingly lighter place. So I don't know. And that was new for me. I always like start in the happier place and go down. And this was really nice.
I was curious, so your first two books, The Adults and then Notes on Your Sudden Disappearance, are kind of coming of age. Mm-hmm. And this one felt kind of like a coming of age in some ways, and the thought of coming of age at 40, as Phoebe is, feels like a twist on it, but did it feel similar in the way that like a coming of self mm-hmm. to the teen narrators of your first two books?
Yeah, I think everything I write feels like a coming of age story to me, because I think of a coming of age story as a story about someone who can't really see themselves or their environment in the beginning, and then by the end have their eyes wide open, and they're like, oh, this is who I am, and this is the world I belong to. It's like a coming of age, coming into yourself and knowing who you're supposed to be and how you're supposed to act. And my first book, The Adults, was always described as a coming-of-age novel, but it actually takes place at like 5 different points in this young woman's life. So it's not just one summer when she was 14, it's then you see her again at 18, and then 21, and then 24, or 26, because I felt like that was true of my life growing up. Like you do have these epiphanies, and you do come into yourself at certain parts of your life, and you think, oh yeah, I'm not a kid anymore. I'm a woman now, you know. And then but then you have those moments over and over and over again, because I think we don't know what it means to be 21 until we're 21. We don't know what it means to be 40 until we're 40. Like I feel like I'm always learning about myself and about what it means to be myself at this age and this room, and you know, and I just love writing that. You know, I love reading that. I love writing that, and so yeah, this book is about that. You know, it's about being a certain way, being a wife for 15 years, having one dream, and then pivoting from that and coming of age, you know, becoming a 40-year-old woman who has a different dream and has a different goal and a different way of seeing herself.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.